This is one of the more fun benchmarks I've done in Tarkov. So, lossless scaling has a dual GPU feature that lets you render the game on one GPU and then use another GPU just for frame generation. In this setup, I'm using a GTX 980 Ti to render Tarkov, and a GTX 1060 6GB is handling lossless scaling frame generation. The reason I think this setup is interesting is because Tarkov is such an extremely CPU bound game. In Tarkov, your CPU determines your FPS ceiling, so if it's strong enough, you can get away with a lot less GPU than a typical AAA game. So just note that I am using a 9800X3D here, which is basically the best gaming CPU on the planet right now. So I'm not trying to say you can throw a 980 Ti into anything and you're good. The CPU is carrying the GPUs here, but that's just how Tarkov runs. So what I think is useful to know here is that an 11-year-old GPU that you can get for around 60 to 70 bucks if you look around can be very good for Tarkov at 1080. It still has enough raw performance to run the game without scaling. And then I added on a GTX 1060 6GB, which you can find for around 40 to 50 bucks if you look for a good used deal, just to boost that base performance of the 980 Ti. And I think there's one really important thing to understand with frame generation. Frame generation does not fix bad base performance. If you're running at 45 FPS and the game feels bad, turning on frame generation might make the FPS counter look higher, but it's not going to feel like true high FPS gameplay. The real feel of the game is still tied to your base frame rate. Frame generation mainly helps with motion clarity and visual smoothness. It can make the image look smoother while you're moving around, but your mouse input is still based on the real frames underneath it. So after testing frame generation over the years in many games, my general rule of thumb is that you want at least 80 to 100 real base FPS before you even consider using it. Below that, the latency trade-off starts to become a problem, in my opinion. But at 80 to 100 base FPS, the added latency is usually small enough that most people probably won't care. We're talking something like 5 to 10 extra milliseconds, depending on the setup. If you're an esports player or a highly competitive player, that might be enough reason to skip it. If you're extremely sensitive to input lag or you just want the cleanest raw input possible, I would leave frame generation off. But for the majority of gamers out there, especially if you're playing casually or just trying to make the game look smoother on cheaper hardware, I think it's worth testing for yourself. Just remember, the key is that your base FPS already has to be good, and that's why it's working here. The CPU is strong enough to keep the base frame rate high, the 980 Ti is good enough to run 1080 native without scaling, and the 1060 here is just helping with visual smoothness through lossless scaling. Now, I'm not telling someone to go and build this exact setup instead of just buying a better GPU, but I think it's a cool experiment, and if you already have old hardware sitting around, or you just want to try and stretch an ultra budget build, I think this is a pretty cool use case. And the main takeaway here is pretty simple. In Tarkov, your CPU and RAM are the foundation. A lot of people in the comments go, oh, Tarkov is all CPU, GPU doesn't matter at all. It's true that the CPU and RAM make up probably 80 to 85% of the performance in Tarkov, but the GPU still matters. It determines what resolution and settings you can play in, and that's a big deal to me because it determines your visual settings. So yeah, I'm trying something a little different with this one. Instead of just showing the benchmark footage and letting it run, I wanted to actually talk through the results a little bit and explain what I found interesting. This is less of a full scripted review and more just me sharing my thoughts while the benchmark plays. So let me know what you think of this format. If you like the commentary, I can do more benchmark videos like this instead of just posting straight gameplay with the FPS overlay. Hope you guys found it interesting. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.